here at the Synth Museum with a Mark VI that I built. So when I designed these instruments, I'd been servicing the 400 Mellotron for at least 10-12 years. And I had realized that there were some inherent drawbacks with the execution of the principle. The main mistake that they had done was the motor control card. So that made the Mellotrons go out of tune, and it made them unstable overall. The other problem that was with the instruments was that the tape transport mechanism wasn't optimized. So I improved on that, and I added also the high-low speed switch to give you basically a whole 3 more sounds basically. And then also just the preamp. This has an improved preamp, and also the line amp with the balancing is also our own design. So it's got tip ring sleeve balanced output, which is really useful, and the overall noise level is much lower than on 400. So those are the things that we improved. So to talk about the principle of tape playback keyboard instruments, you have a strip of tape, and it's not a loop because it wouldn't know where to start when it stops in one point. So there's a strip with a defined start, and then there's a spring-loaded mechanism that pulls the tape back. So you have an axle and a flywheel spinning all the time. The flywheel giving it stability when you hit 10 keys at a time. And then you have a motor with a high precision speed control. So I improved also the motor. The motor quality is of a much higher precision type. It's more designed for constant speed applications than the motor for the M400s were. So you have the axle, and it's spinning the whole time, and then you have the strips of tape, and you have 35 tape heads. So I can show you all of that here. So here you have the 35 tape heads on one headlock channel, and the tapes have the start points just over the tape heads. So when the tape starts, it will start hopefully in the starting point if you adjusted it correctly. So these marks are just approximate marks that I made when I made the tapes, because the final adjustment is always done inside the machine. The tapes are of a very unusual format. Anybody who's familiar with tape will know that this is not ½ inch and it's not ¼ inch. It's 3/8 inch. And you can see it's a very convenient format for putting tapes into a keyboard. You have track A recorded to the left, the B is the middle track, and the C is the one recorded to the right. And you have on A, for instance, flute. I think in this case it's choir, and then you have strings, and in this case it was recorder. When you press the key like this, the roller grabs the tape, and together with the capstan axle drives the tape into this spill box, where it just curls up real nicely, like on a Roland tape echo or something like that. And this is this little pressure pad presses the tape against the head, and that's what gives you basically the sound of what's on the tape. This is of course a mechanism that was invented by Harry Chamberlain, but his instruments never were were widely used outside of California because they had so many inherent problems. The one genius design that the Mellotron company came up with is the tape frame. So all other Mellotrons and Chamberlains have, except for the Mark V, this design is based on a 400 Mellotron. The Mellotron company came out with the Mark V that had 2 keyboards, but it's exactly the same principle, but then just one capstan axle, so you have the same tuning for both keyboards. The famous uses of this instrument is Paul McCartney with Wings and Led Zeppelin on the 1977 US tour. Tangerine Dream also used it. There's very few of those instruments. We believe around about only 40 or so of the Mark V instruments. All other Mellotrons and Chamberlains had the tapes pre-installed. So of course then my line of instruments, the Mark VI and the Mark VII with 2 manuals, those also have this principle of removable tape frames, which makes it possible for you to have like a very large library of sounds. And You can even make your own recordings, and it's like Tangerine Dream did back in the day. So there's like a big library of their sounds. And so here is the tape frame that comes out like this. And here you can also see the spring mechanism that pulls back the double, I hate to say loop, but it's not an endless loop like I said. It's a double loop, so this makes it more compact. Otherwise the instrument would have to be this tall if there would just be one strip of tape that wouldn't have these, be in this looping mechanism. Easy to disassemble, easy to service. A lot of bands, of course, toured with the 400 in the 70s, like Led Zeppelin and Yes and David Bowie and Tangerine Dream, and many bands were touring with it in the 70s. Genesis, of course, they had one of the later 400s. You can hear that when they used the pitch knob, because also the pitch was improved on this later type of motor control. Here you see the spill box where the tapes just spill into when you play them. This is how, when they're played back, they just fold nicely into this box, and then the spring pulls it back. So it's a very straightforward principle when you know how to do it, so to say. And again, this is the principle that the Music Master series of Chamberlin instruments applied. That those had cycling mechanisms so you were able to change sounds by spooling to a new station of tapes. And that was what the first Mellotron also was like. They copied the Music Master right off, basically. So these were much more reliable. The other small but important improvement I made on these, on the rollers, is that these have a metal center. So you can oil them afterwards with a precision oiling device. The 400 and the Chamberlin always used plastic centers, so they would wear out and get a lot of dirt inside of them. And also they didn't use stainless steel in the axles, so after 10 years or so, and you've had it out in a garage or in a storage space, they would start to rust, and so that the rollers would stick. And this is the one main reason why the 400s and many Chamberlins are very hard to play. The other reason is that when these tapes come down from above, the 400 had just a bent piece of chromed metal here. I put in a row of rollers so that the tape would travel more easily, and I would say that those two factors just makes this instrument will last longer and will play a lot easier than for example a 400. If you listen to old samplers, even from the mid 80s, and you compare it to a Mellotron, it's just no contest. You know, it's only when you get to these where you have just basically streaming off sounds from a hard drive, that's when you get to a similar quality of that you have in a Mellotron. 3-track tapes. So here we have on A. Oh, it was the recorder on A. A very unusual sound, and then of course with a half speed, it turns into like a pump organ or something like that. So then with B, on B you have a mix of 3 violins and cello, and of course down here you have the upright bass, like on the cello. The cello starts with a C. Again, the half speed gives you a completely different character to the sound. And then here you have on C the classic 8-voice choir. That's used by Genesis and Radiohead and many others. This gives you a really weird effect with half speed, but it's a completely different sound. And then of course, as with the others, you can fine tune it or with a pitch knob. All of this speed and everything, of course, basically just changes the speed of the motor. So now it's running much slower, and therefore the capstan is running slower, and therefore the tapes are played back much slower. this instrument also has, like all 400 Mellotrons, they have detachable front panels, so you can see if there's anything going wrong with the tapes. And here you can also see the tube preamp. I should say the tube line amp. The preamp is up in the headblock channel, which improves the signal to noise ratio a lot and makes it immune to any radio signals, which you have a lot of trouble with nowadays on a 400 Mellotron. And this is just the line out amplifier with a transformer-less balanced output. And here's the connector for the volume pedal. Those are the basic principles and ideas behind the Mark VI. It was a bummer always that the Mellotron company and even the Chamberlain company never managed to make the principle of the keyboard tape replay and justice. There were just some minor things, in my opinion, minor that needed to be addressed, and I hope I did that with this instrument. That's the whole thing.